Go, 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 go.
3, 2, 1, 4 tires.
Still there, inside.
What a jump, what a jump.
The track is wet, it's good.
Still there, clear.
3, 2, 1. Green flag, green flag.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Four and Field podcast. I'm your host, Dom Capilupo, joined by Steve Ray, Wesley Riddle, and Sam Dooley. We're here for a Front Row Motorsports 2026 season preview. The driver lineup for Front Row Motorsports is Noah Gragson in the 4, Todd Gilliland in the 34, and Zane Smith in the 38.
Yeah, and just quickly going over some of their team stats from 2025, adding the full-time third car, bumped their races up to 108 races last year, 3 full-time cars, although they did not get any wins on the year. 3 top 5s and 13 top 10s on the year, just slight increases from the year prior. Their average finish took a little bit of a dip by about 1 spot down to 22.4. And their average start took quite a bit of a hit, dropping about 5 spots from 18.5 to 23.7. Although with Michael McDowell leaving the team in 2025, that dropped their poles from 6 to 1 in 2025. And with that being as well, 52 laps led compared to the 386 that they had in 2024. Leading the way in the points standings for Front Row last year, finishing 27th in points, is Todd Gilliland, the Todd father himself. Again, he ran all 36 races, finishing 27th in points, dropping 5 spots from the year prior in 2024, where he finished 22nd. Still chasing his first career Cup Series win going into this season, although he did finish with 1 top 5 and 5 top 10s on the year. His average finish was very similar at 20.81. His average finish, as pointed out with the team stats, his average start dropped by about 3.5 spots there. No poles, 2 DNFs, and only 23 laps led, down from 130 in the year before. Just a note here that Gilliland finished second in the Talladega Fall race. That was his best career finish. I think there's not that big of expectations. It's certainly, numbers, we can dissect those all day long. But I think the big thing, and will be a common theme in all of the Front Row cars, is that they're all pretty similar in statistics, and they're all right around each other in point standings too. So I think they're one of those few teams that when you start improving on one car, I feel like that will benefit all 3 of the drivers there. Certainly for Todd, coming back for another full-time year with Front Row Motorsports. Just like with some of these teams that we've been going over recently, the biggest thing is just improving on these stats, getting the top 5s up, getting the top 10s up, getting the laps led, stage points, things like that are going to be big things. Are they going to be race contenders every single week? Probably not. But I think if you can start, it starts with qualifying. Taking a 25.5 average starting spot certainly puts you behind the 8 ball right away to start the race. And that's going to, get you back in traffic to start the race, not going to help with much stage points. So I think if they can improve on that, get up to, 18th to 20th, start to work on the car in the first stage, try to go for those couple stage points there. Certainly try to flip some stages at road courses, things like that. Todd does a great job of keeping the car in one piece, as proven by only 2 DNFs on the year. So he does do a great job in limiting the mistakes there. I think a lot of it is just, unfortunately, equipment based, things like that. But certainly tracks to look for: your Daytonas, your Talladegas, your Atlantas. Those are all going to be good tracks for any of these 3 Front Row Motorsports drivers. And I think much like the 2311 team, Front Row was right in the middle of the lawsuit as well. So getting that passed and behind them now, that just puts all of their focus into 2026. So um, I do think that Todd will improve on these stats this year. Maybe not by a lot, but I do think that we'll see improvement this year from the driver of the 34, Todd Gilliland.
Yeah, I think with Todd Gilliland, it's more or less, yeah, like you said, Steve, that starting position is huge, and that's been the main theme of these previews is just gotta start better, get those a chance for stage points. And with Todd Gilliland maybe losing Michael McDowell as a teammate kind of hurt for a year. Don't have that veteran presence really to kind of have that mentor with you. And obviously, McDowell brought so much raw speed in qualifying for that team. So that probably missing that veteran presence didn't help and maybe took some time to get used to because you got three of the younger guys in the Cup Series all on the same team. So I'd expect Todd to step it up this year, and really I could see him doing better than what he did in 25, building off of the end of the season where he kind of things started to click a little bit better. So Todd Gilliland, will we see him get back to the top 25 like he was in 2024?
Yeah, I can see. I think top 25 is a reasonable goal, and I do think that it is achievable for the team. Top 20 might be a bit of a stretch, but I think somewhere in that 23rd to 25th range, I think is obtainable for the 34 team. And so I will say that Todd Gilliland will return to the top 25.
Yeah, I think that that's a good goal for Gilliland to shoot for. Of course, with the whole new point system and everything that we're looking at, it'll look a little bit different. But kind of where he's been at, where Front Row's been at, it's really the same because you're just you're not a playoff for the most part. They haven't been in the playoffs unless McDowell found a way to get them in. So. The whole playoff situation really won't affect their points position that much, but I think that that Gillen's in a good spot where he's at. Just keep working, keep getting better, and I think that I can see Gillen in the top 25 as well.
I'll say yes as well. I like his just overall consistency when the team has it together, and I feel like 2024 was a good testament of that. Last year was just a little bit off, but I feel like now that they've had 2 years under their belt, just kind of with the changes that they've had to go through, and then obviously with the lawsuit, I think that Todd's a guy that can really get his footing down pat, and he's got really good short track ability. I think he'll be able to show up in Martinsville like he always does, and just kind of nail off some good top 25s. And I feel like that's all he really needs to be able to finish top 25 in points.
I mean, that's a great point. You bring it up there, Wes, is the lawsuit. They're obviously right there with 2311, racing unchartered there for about half the season. So you got to think it can only go up from here in 2026, which, yeah, I think Todd Gilliland will be in that top 25 on the fringe of the top 20 for sure. And wouldn't be surprised if Todd Gilliland was able to maybe sneak a win out at Atlanta or Talladega or Daytona for sure.
I just want to add too that, for a majority of the season, Front Row was in jeopardy of possibly not being even around this year, just with their financial situation, with how much Bob Jenkins has invested in the sport. So, having things kind of go their way at the end of last year, just with how the lawsuit was settled, kind of gives them, I feel like, a lot more of a confidence boost that other teams won't have going into this year. So for them, that's going to be definitely a motivating factor to be able to go out. And I feel like, the guys that they have in that stable, but especially Todd Gilliland, just with his legacy and his dad, they go back a long time in NASCAR and motorsports, his whole family. So I think that'll really set Todd up nicely for the season.
Absolutely. So let's jump into Zane Smith. Zane Smith in 2025 did all 36 races. He finished 28th in the standings, 1 point behind Todd Gilliland. Had no wins, still looking for that first career win. One top five, five top tens, an average finish of 21.08, an average starting spot of 20.1. He did have one pole, had five DNFs, and led 22 laps. For Zane Smith, he transitioned over to Front Row Motorsports in 2025 after running a season with Spire in the 71 car. So him and McDowell basically swapped rides. And for Zane Smith, you saw some flashes. You saw him have a chance at the Bristol night race to potentially sneak a win in there, get his first career win. But it just felt like Zane Smith had more flashes of speed in 25 than he did in 2024. 2024, the only real race you remember him like being right there at the finish was Nashville, but that was also after the 5 overtime chaos finish there. Zane Smith, other than that, he was known for, taking a wild ride at Kansas. And for Zane Smith, I think obviously he scored 110 more points in 2025. So the change to Front Row was big for him. He already had familiarity with the organization, raced there in the Truck Series for a few years. So definitely more than a lateral move, I think, for Zane. And I would not be surprised to see him maybe get a couple more top fives in 2026 and maybe even steal a win or two.
Yeah, when I look at Zane Smith, I kind of see I kind of see this in all of Front Row really is that they're young, they're hungry, and that they have a lot of upside, right? Obviously, the equipment's not underneath them, but it's obvious that Front Row has gone out and handpicked these guys that they're young, they want to be here, they're working hard to be here, and they're hungry for those wins, and they're hungry to make the car better than what it is. And that's a good strategy for a mid to back pack uh, team is to look at these guys that are young and they're working hard to get everything that they have, every scrap. They're scrapping away to try and get to where they are. Um, and that's a great strategy that they have, and I see it a lot in Zane Smith. Um, is that he's young and he shows flashes like we talked about, and he just kind of lacks that consistency. And if we could see more consistency out of Zane Smith, I think that it would pay huge dividends for him and for Front Row in general. Um, so I could see Zane Smith really coming on this year. That's not like a guarantee. That's not a promise. I could just see it as, he's shown flashes. If he could get consistent with those flashes, that I think that he could be a really good driver this year in the Cup Series.
I would completely agree with that too. He was definitely improving towards the middle of the later part of the season. Dom, you mentioned the Bristol night race. I go back to the summer Atlanta race too, where he was right in contention at the end of that race as well. So definitely stats from here don't show really the full story, I think, of Zane Smith last year. I do see improvement coming further from Zane this year, improving on a 28th place finish in the points. I do see him contending for a win or two, improving on the top fives, the top tens, laps led. I mean, really every statistical category I can see him improving on this year.
And I still stand by it. I think Zane Smith is the most underrated driver in Cup. I feel like he's arguably, and just in my personal opinion, I think he's the best driver that didn't make the the top 16 last year. Um, I think he's just got that real talented, just raw ability, kind of like Carson Hocevar. But it just gets a little bit overlooked because he's in a little bit slower of a car. But you look at it last year, yeah, his run at Bristol was incredible. His run at Michigan was incredible. He was going to finish top 10, I think, both Kansas and, I think Indianapolis, and then was taken out in both of those with less than 10 to go. So he, just needs to get to the finish line a little bit better, but a lot of that's not even been of his own doing. Some of it was pit crew mistakes, and then some of it was just getting swept up with other people making poor judgment. So I think Zane can have a really solid year, like y'all mentioned. And yeah, he's a driver I feel like that if the opportunity comes by the end of this season, I think could definitely get a boost into a better ride. I feel like a lot of teams would have their eye on him.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like he has that raw speed and just it's not talked about as much because he's not reckless. with Carson Hocevar, his name is brought up so much because of the recklessness. So he's got the speed, but he's also reckless. And with Zane, he's a much cleaner driver. He's a much more respectable driver on the racetrack. So really, people might not talk about him as much because he's not the guy that's going to throw it in there and try to throw haymakers like crazy all the time. And sometimes he'll just kind of settle and live another day as opposed to going all out trying to take a 15th and make it a top 10. Now, Zane Smith, like I said before, 1 point behind Todd Gilliland. Will he be the lead driver for Front Row at the end of 2026?
I do think he will be. I think him and Gilliland are going to be close in points again. So I would actually put, we talked about having Todd Gilliland in the top 25 in points. I think Zane Smith will join him in the top 25 as well.
I have to agree with Steve here. That was the exact same thought process I was having. Is if we're gonna have one in the top 25, I think that the other is gonna be there as well. So I think that Zane Smith, uh, I don't think he's gonna be head and shoulders above Todd Gilliland, but I think that he's going to be on pace and just like a tick better because I think he's gonna pick something up, and he's gonna be somewhere in that 20th to 25. I believe both of those drivers will be in that 20th to 25 kind of range. So yeah, I think Zane Smith will be the lead driver front row next year.
I agree. I feel like you just look at the Indianapolis race and the Kansas race, right? If those races played out and he didn't get wrecked at the end by Bell and John Hunter Nemechek and those two, I mean, he would have had 40 points on Todd Gilliland just right there alone. And that's not kind of breaking down each race to see how they each played out for each of their own races. But I think Zane just continues to show improvement. I feel like he's going to get better and better. And it wouldn't shock me at all, honestly, if he was able to get a win. I think he's that good. I really do. And it just needs to play to his advantage. Kind of bank off the faster cars that are out on the racetrack. Just have some misfortune, but it's not out of reach. It definitely isn't for him.
I'd go as far to say his top 20 is definitely not unrealistic for Zane Smith, and honestly, he could be on the bubble, be in that fringe chase talk. Might not. I'm not saying he's going to make the chase, but he'll be in the conversation. I think coming down to those final regular season races, and well, I think he'll be ahead of Todd Gilliland. And one last thing is his name is going to be one to watch out for potentially for top rides, like Wes said, maybe like that 48 car. Maybe if Brad Keselowski steps away after this season, maybe he goes into the 6 car. Just a few more rides, maybe that he'd be able to be in consideration for if he were to leave the 38 car for maybe a better ride.
And with that, that'll take us to our third and final driver for our breakdown of Front Row Motorsports, and that was Noah Gragson. Gregson definitely had the roughest go when it came to the 2025 year. 36 races. He finished 34th in points. That's down 10 positions from his 2024 year. Had no wins, one top five that matched, but only 3 top 10s with an average finish of 25.1. That bounced back from 19.6 in 2024. So, pretty significant dip. I feel like one of the biggest ones out of the entire competition. And his average starting position also dropped to a 25.7. Didn't have any poles, and he also had 2 more DNFs. The DNFs really hurt him this year, but it was kind of a theme for a lot of the field. It seemed like there were more DNFs in 2025 than there were in 2024 by like double. But he only led 7 laps, and the most disappointing stat just in the book was he only had 9 top 20 finishes, and that was a significant dip just from what he had in 24. It just seemed like they couldn't put any races together. And, he wasn't really crashing a whole lot, but it seemed like he ended up getting caught up in almost everything. And then just didn't really have the speed compared to 2024, where we saw him show up and have that really good, like 3 or 4 race stretch, in the early part of the summer 2 years ago. And last year, he didn't really have anything aside from, let's see, Circuit of the Americas, Talladega, and the Coke 600. Those were his only 3 top 10 finishes. The Coke 600, he had the best speed. But aside from that, it was pretty much absent the entire year. So they really need to figure out exactly kind of what the performance dip was, what caused it. I mean, he almost lost 200 points just in 1 year. And Noah, he's not a guy that gets worse. You look back at his tenure in the Truck Series with Kyle Busch Motorsports. You look back in Xfinity when he raced for Junior Motorsports. He was able to get better and show signs of improvement, as the years went on. So for him to take a dip, it just doesn't seem like that's, his in his nature. So there was probably some other stuff going on behind the scenes, and of course the lawsuit. Front Row having a third car now, it can really change the course of a team's direction and just how the year plays out. So hopefully Noah should have a rebound year, and it seems like just from kind of his past history in the other two series, like I mentioned, I think he will have an up year. It's just a matter of how much. There's not really that many drivers I feel like that he could get around. He could compete with his teammates, but there's always one car I feel like in the three team staples that just struggles and is a little bit slower than the rest. And unfortunately, it seems like it might just be the four car.
Yeah, 116 points behind Todd Gilliland in the same stable is not very good, and Noah probably knows that himself. And really going from a Stuart Haas racing team in 24 that was kind of, well, obviously was fading out, going into a Front Row Motorsports that really showed promise in 2024, you really didn't think it was that much of a step back, considering the ride situation. So I don't know if Noah is just not very, like, the next gen doesn't play to his driving style. But yeah, to see a regression like that, where your teammates are both 115 and 116 points ahead of you, is definitely very concerning for sure. And dropping 6 spots in average finish, yeah, that might be the biggest drop in the series.
Yeah, when you look at Noah Gragson, it's really weird because you'd think, honestly, this would be a lateral to maybe even better move because, Stuart Haas was on its way out. So you're not looking at him to be very good at Stewart Haas. And then you come here and it's like, this is the new team. This is we're looking up. And, like Wes said, there's the third car, adding the third car and him being the third car that's added. That could have some effect to it. But I mean, hands down, this is the most disappointing season I think of anyone in Cup right now. Because everyone was looking to him. I'm not necessarily saying that we were expecting him to be better because he's in a new situation. It takes some time to get acclimated to that sometimes, but I was at least looking forward to him being the lead car at Front Row and kind of maintaining pace with what he was at Stewart Haas, and he took a huge step back. And I don't know if it was the lawsuit, if it was personal. I'm not really sure what it was. I know that when I was at Talladega and I was there in the infield or in the garage and everything, it seemed like the entire weekend there was just this just carnival of influencers that were around him. I don't know if they were invited by him or if they just were attracted to him because the big personality that he has. But it just felt like there was so much going on that was just non-NASCAR on in basically your work weekend. Um, I can't speak. I'm not on the inside. I can't speak to what that does, but from the outside, from optics perspective, when you're the 34th fourth place car in points and you're taking a big step back from what you were the year before at a team that was supposedly supposed to be shutting down and not giving a shit about anything anymore, and now you're at a team that you go to and you should be the focal point of this team, and you take a huge step back like this, the optics of seeing this huge carnival of people around you just shooting videos and having fun. I'm not saying you can't have fun. Obviously, 36 weeks of racing and plus, all-star race and all of these, you're locked in. You're allowed to have fun at work. But the optics of everything, looking at it, it rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. Just because he was so bad this year compared to what we would have expected coming out of that four car. Um, I don't, like I said, I don't know if that even had an effect at all, but it didn't look great. And I think that I think that he's got a lot more in it. I think he's a lot better, and that's why I'm, being so hard on him is because I expect more out of Noah, and this year wasn't it. This past year was not it. So looking forward into 2026, he needs to correct whatever it is that is causing this issue, and it could be a team issue too. I'm not beyond saying that it's a team issue. I'm not saying it's only him. There's 20 other guys that work on that car every week, right? So it's not entirely him, but when it comes down to it, you're the guy that's turning the steering wheel. You're the guy that's hit the gas, and it's you can't have such a regression like that when you're kind of looked to preseason as being the favorite to be the staple driver for that team.
Yep. So the question is, will Noah Gragson get into the top 30 in points in 2026?
I'm going to say no. He is one of the biggest question marks that I have this year, and I just don't see the improvement from Noah like we will from Zane and Todd. Wes brought up a great point too. It seems like when you get into these 3 and 4 car teams, that there's just that one car that seems to struggle. You think of Austin Cindric at Penske, you think of Riley Herbst at 2311. Noah Gragson is unfortunately that guy at Front Row Motorsports, not from a lack of talent, but just there is one car that just seems to be struggling more. Think back to the Hendrick days when the 25 car was running. It just seemed like anybody that was in that car was struggling. So, no, I don't see Noah finishing 30th and top 30 in points.
I'm gonna say I don't think it'll happen, but he sure as hell better because, like I was saying, you were kind of brought in to be this. I don't want to say that he was the lead guy, but you kind of are in the situation that he's in. You got he's a younger guy, but like you've got a couple of other younger guys that are in there with you too, and you've kind of got the experience of this group, and you're looking at him, and it's not looking good if you have two back to back outside of the top 30 finishes in points. So. I'm gonna say that I don't see him necessarily finishing in the top 30, but also he's gonna be on one hell of a hot seat if especially if he gets started out um, really bad and he's towards the back like he was all of last year. He's gonna be on a hell of a hot seat because there's other guys that are just itching to take that spot from him.
I'm gonna say no, but I bet he could be the 30th place guy. I think he could definitely improve in points. And I say that just because, of course, the lawsuit ending, I think that'll free up some of the stress on front row and hopefully, the team and the mechanics that work in the shop. So I think for him too, you look at the guys that finished ahead of him in points, there's not really that many he could leap, but it wouldn't surprise me if he leaps both Collie cars, right? Because they're switching to their own in-house engine program. It wouldn't shock me if they're able to leapfrog Cole Custer in points because, Haas is definitely not what they used to be. And they've been behind the ball since they lost Tony Stewart. And then, maybe a Spire car in there like a Daniel Suarez or McDowell has an off year, right? It wouldn't shock me if one Spire car, kind of in the theme of what we're talking about with there always being one car that's a little bit slower with these 3 to 4 car teams maybe one Spire car he could get around, but I just don't see him leapfrogging the teammates, and it's just not likely that I think he'll get much higher than 30th. So I'm going to say no as well.
Yeah, I'm going to say no as well. It's 122 points that he finished behind Stenhouse, who was 30th. And listen, like you said, Sam, I don't think he will, but he's got to because you got to think in the truck series, they've got a couple guys they could easily replace him in the Cup Series with Lane Riggs and Chandler Smith, two capable drivers that might be ready to go to the Cup Series in 2027. And it would be an easier decision to bring one of those guys up in the Front Row Motorsports if Noah Gragson has another season just like he did. So that was a Front Row Motorsports 2026 season preview. If you aren't already, Make sure you're following the Four in the Field podcast on X, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Make sure you're listening if you're listening, in your car on your commute or just kind of walking around. Yeah, got the headphones in, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you aren't already, subscribe on YouTube. Make sure you're watching these. Sam's been putting up some graphics during the videos as well, so you don't have to just see my ugly face the whole time. You can look at the graphics as well. So if Foreign Field podcast everywhere if you missed all of that. So for Sam, Wes, Steve, I'm Dom, and we'll see you for one more 2026 season preview tomorrow this week, since it's Daytona 500 week.